Okay, cool. So I will. So I think we'll wait just one more minute, but then we will get on. And so for those of you who have joined us, welcome. I'm really excited today to have Ken Nunnenkamp. He is the executive director for the Virginia GOP. And before Ken joined the Virginia GOP, he was the data director of our director of data analytics for the Nunnenkamp campaign, and he's worked on many different campaigns. He's been on 2 presidential races in 2012 and 2020. He's worked for several years as a staff member of Congress in Northern Virginia, and he spent 3 years near and dear to my heart in North Dakota. And then he moved to DC or back to Virginia to his home. And so he's been the Virginia executive director, I want to say, for 2 years, Ken, maybe I'm right, 2 years.
Coming up on the anniversary here.
Yeah. So I'm going to just turn it over to Ken. He's going to, what we're going to do today, and this is the first of a series that I'm hoping that we can bring people all along for the next few months leading up to the election, bringing people on that have a wealth of information about winning campaigns and how we can do that. And so Ken is the first. So if there's some kinks in our system, please bear with me. So Ken is going to talk for a little bit, and he's going to have some Q&A so people can ask questions about him. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Buzz 360 and how we can help with data and some digital outreach. So Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Lisa. And it's great to be here. I always get very excited when we get to talk data, because my day job, as it were, is not data focused anymore. First time in about 5 years. So anytime I get to talk data, I'm very excited. And, I have to say, some of the things that we did on the Nunnenkamp campaign were perhaps not reinventing the wheel, but taking a lot of good ideas and pushing them to the extremes in a very positive way. So really excited to talk about that. One of the things I want to note is when we started the Nunnenkamp campaign, I started about 2 weeks before the announcement, and it was a very small group of us. But before that, I spent a couple of years at the RNC in their data department doing micro-targeting. And it's really interesting to hear the history of Republican data at the RNC, and I'll spare you the full version. But the short version is that essentially, following the 2012 election, presidential election, there was a post-mortem done based on a project called Project Orca, which was a spectacular miss. And there was a post-mortem done that essentially said, we need to invest in data. Fast forward 10 years and hundreds of millions of dollars of investment later, we are, and I can confidently say this, we are at a supreme advantage over the Democrats in data. And I always get the question of people will say, well, don't the Democrats have better data than us? Don't they, isn't their targeting better? And I use this example, but my own mother, which I know the plural of anecdote is not data, but I always use the same example, which is my mother has voted in every Republican primary since I can remember. She's on every Republican list you could think of. And yet every year, and there's not a single flag on her profile that would indicate that she's a Democrat, but every year without fail, she gets a pro-abortion mailer from the Democrats. And the reason is because she is a woman in her 60s. That is the only reason. So when we think about the quality of data that we have available to us, we have to couch it in terms of the fact that we are doing much better than the Democrats. And part of that is the investment we make every year. So a bit of an odd place to start, but I always like to start by talking about that story because, or that fact, because the truth is that we have for years been sitting on mountains of great and usable data. And I think what we're here to talk about today is really the effective strategies for implementing the effective strategies to utilize that data. And I think that's where other campaigns have missed the mark. And I think that's what we were able to do very well in 2021 between the convention and the general election, which was quite a feat to pull off. at the time, and we had a very large team, and we were very blessed to work with some amazing people. So just to start at the beginning, the basics, I guess. When we talk about data, a lot of people will naturally assume that we're talking about, the voter file or cell phone numbers or other demographic information that can be easily pulled, purchased, it's accessible. Typically, when we use the term data, what we're talking about is modeling. And when I use the term data throughout most of this, that's what I'm going to be referring to for the most part, is either modeling or purchase consumer data that we're aggregating. So modeling, right? This is a great concept, something that happens in the corporate world all the time. Of course, we were joking about that story with Target earlier, but essentially, rewind about 7-8 years, and what you can see is that it became very hard to define large groups of people as, say, hard Republican, hard Democrat, weak Republican, weak Democrat, because the truth was we were looking at partisanship, when instead we needed to be looking at turnout and partisanship on the issues. So, if someone is a diehard Republican voter, but they only show up every other year in Virginia, they're not a hard Republican this year. Because if I can't get you to show up to the polls in 2023, we can't classify you as a hard Republican. So we measure things on an XY axis without going into too much detail that basically give us a picture of who's going to vote this year and how they're going to vote. What's the percentage likelihood they'll vote this year? And what's the percentage likelihood they'll vote for us? That's kind of how we think about it. These are modeling projects that are done every year. We actually are just finishing our second modeling project of this year, a refresh on that. And it gives us a lot of insight into who we should be talking to. One of the brass tacks realities I think we need to accept as Republicans, especially when we have national focus on our campaigns, it's rare that we outspend the Democrats, especially once some of those big unions start writing checks and, the money starts flowing out of California. It's very rare that we can actually spend more than our opponents, which means that we have to do more with the dollars we have and make them go further. One of the ways we do that is through targeting. So if you think about when we model, we come up with what we call a universe, right? It's a list of voters, and we say, this is the list of voters. We know some of these are get out the vote voters. We got to prod them to go to the polls. Some of them are swing voters. They're persuadable. They're right in the middle. And we've got to go talk to them about our message. But in general, we'll come up with one number of voters that we want to talk to throughout the campaign. And that is the underlying basis of everything we do. In 2021, we came up with a number of voters that we were going to talk to. Now, the other side of this is that we already knew what the expected turnout would be, both by looking at historical results and by modeling turnout. So we kind of have an idea of what percentage of the electorate is going to show up. From that, we know that, pick a number, something reasonable, we want to have twice as many people to talk to as may show up in the election, right? Or something like that. Differs year to year, depending on the population and depending on the work that you've got to do. But so our massive target universe, which is much smaller than the total number of registered voters, our target universe is always going to be based on turnout and who we actually think it's important to spend our time talking to. Not to say it's not important to talk to everyone, but here we are in Virginia, 70 days out from an election, and then we'll be 364 days out from another one. So, and one of the things I'll just pause and say, one of the things I love about Virginia is that we really have to focus hard on making a good plan, sticking to it, and getting it done quickly, because we do have an election every year here. So it's a good microcosm for how to run an efficient campaign. So a couple things on the Youngkin campaign early on to start. After we had our modeling done, one of the biggest things we looked at was who is in a persuadable category for a number of reasons, right? When we talk about swing voters, there's a tendency to think that they all think the same, right? Like, oh, this is a middle of the road voter. They're moderate. They could go either way. Well, that's not what a swing voter is. What a swing voter is it's anyone who, when you look at how Republican they are and how Democrat they are, ends up somewhere in the middle. So that doesn't mean that they're, maybe moderate left this year, moderate right. It could be, or it could mean that they have some extremely conservative views and some extremely liberal views. And that gets them right into the middle. It also could be that they have a general amount of apathy or don't have knowledge of the candidates. For whatever reason, we always want to look at that group first and say, okay, what is the messaging behind what we're doing, right? How are we going to talk to those people? So after we had our modeling done for that, we went into a subset of issue-based modeling. How do people feel about education? How do they feel about law enforcement and crime? What issue is most important to people? The game that the Democrats play is picking a few hot button national issues and ignoring what's important to people to try to get folks fired up. I think where we try to correct for that on the Republican side is we want to know what's important to you, but not what direction that's important. I'm confident that our message on education and parents' rights resonates with anyone that cares about education. Maybe even to the point where we can flip votes, but I'm confident that it'll at least resonate. So when we talk about targeting and micro-targeting, we're not altering a message. We're just deciding who to deliver that message to because we want to talk to people about what they care about. So I'll give you a great example, and this is my favorite example from the campaign. Early July, so just after Terry McAuliffe became the nominee, one of the biggest issues we were focusing on was crime safety and law enforcement. We had a lot of data that indicated that folks were very concerned about crime and safety. People in suburbs, in suburbs and higher income communities and lower income communities, middle income communities, no one was feeling safe in their neighborhood at the time. There's a lot of factors for that, and we were directly post-pandemic, so there's definitely a lot of intricacies there. But the summary of it was that people weren't feeling safe. So we decided to message heavily on law enforcement and crime and safety. Now, what was really, really good timing is that at the same time, we had just been endorsed by a whole number of sheriffs in Virginia. So the timing worked out very well. So we decided we were going to cut together an ad, right? And it was one of those really fun ads where it's, one paragraph of text, maybe 6 or 7 sentences, but it's kind of a different person delivering each sentence. You know what I'm talking about, right? They're walking in front of the car and it cuts to a different person, same scene, right? Delivering the next line. So very fun, right? So if you look at the ad that was cut, the 30-second version kind of looks like a really well done, but generic pro-law enforcement ad. That was not what most folks in the Commonwealth saw. So we had sheriff's endorsements from all over. Sheriff Chapman up in Loudoun County, Northern Virginia, Sheriff Leonard down in the suburbs of Richmond. We had folks from all over, sheriffs from all over Virginia that had endorsed and had agreed to participate in this ad. So if you lived in the Richmond area or the Richmond DMA, you were going to see an ad or get served an ad directly to your phone, tablet, computer that was specific to your area. So you were going to see Sheriff Leonard, and chances are you either know who he is or you say, oh, Chesterfield County. Oh, that's the neighboring county. So we're not only talking to people about what's important to them, we're also creating a geographic link so that they know that the other folks close to home support the same thing. And so we took one ad and ran multiple variations across the state for the remainder of the campaign. And at a certain point, we were just serving that ad digitally, right? OTT, CTV, stands for over the top and connected TV. It's like when you're watching Hulu and an ad comes on, or Amazon Prime. We were serving that ad to folks that had a high, that had law enforcement, crime, and safety as one of their top issues. So that was one of my favorite examples of how we were using data and targeting. The other thing we did was a really in-depth dive on turnout. So a lot of people have a tendency, and it is an expense question, but a lot of people have a tendency to look at lower turnout folks and write them off. It's just a mathematical formula, right? If you are at the very bottom of the turnout scale from 0 to 100, let's say you're at a 10 out of 100, right? That doesn't mean you're not going to vote. That just means that you are 10% likely to vote. So out of every 10 people, one may come out and vote. So we were looking very heavily at investing our resources, and we were able to use data to determine where our ROI was highest. So for things that were a lot cheaper, texting, digital advertising, or static digital advertising, we were able to actually reach groups of voters that we hadn't previously reached before in campaigns, because we weren't looking at them as a unified, everyone gets the same message bucket, right? We were looking at their individual scores, looking at what they cared about and how likely they were to vote. Of course, if someone's only voting in presidential year and we don't have a good enough message that'll resonate with them, they're gonna hear from us less. The other thing we did on turnout was we did something a little bit interesting in a good way. We looked at lower turnout swing voters. There's a subset of the population of swing voters, I believe, that is less inclined to show up and vote because there's not issues that resonate with them on the ballot, or at least that's what they perceive, right? So when we're talking to voters and they're getting mail piece after mail piece about, let's say, red meat issues, they're getting your standard conservative mailers, this is what they're hearing. Maybe the only thing that's important to them is the fact that they have an hour-long commute on the highway because of congestion, and it could be a 20-minute commute, right? And you'd be surprised how much of an impact roads can have. So when we were looking at lower propensity folks that turn out, you have to be careful because these audiences can grow very large if you let them, and we want them to be smaller. We want to only talk to people about things they care about. So what we did in one example was we had a sort of transportation focused concept, right? It was talking about improving our roads, maintaining the highways, relieving congestion, et cetera, et cetera. So we can look at lower likelihood to turn out swing voters. They're kind of right in the middle, and they're really not that likely to show up, maybe flip a coin, maybe less of a chance. And then we marry that up with people who had a 35-minute commute or more every day. So we're talking to a small group of people that care about transportation, have a long commute, and for those folks, I live in Richmond right now. I am in the furthest possible suburb you can get, and it takes me 17 minutes to get downtown. When I was in Northern Virginia, I lived about 3 miles outside of the city. It could take me an hour to get downtown. So chances are if they have that kind of a commute, that they're not moving with traffic pretty quick, right? They're fighting traffic. So, that was an example where we were able to serve ads to those folks and really talk to them about what they cared about. The other side of the coin, right? Measuring how we were doing, constantly evaluating our position, looking at whether or not what we were doing was correct. We had a lot of different ways that we could analyze our performance, especially over digital. But one of the biggest things is we were constantly updating our messaging. There was not a single person on the campaign that would ever get so stuck. And this is a very lucky thing. This is not very common, that would get so stuck in the idea of this is what will influence voters, that we were ignoring the messaging and the data. And so that was great. Really, really key to be able to constantly look at how our messages were performing and improve them. I think we did a lot of A/B testing where you send out an email that has 2 different subject lines. You can send 5% of your list one subject line, 5% another one, and then the other 90% get whichever one performed best in 2 hours. So lots of really fun things like that. But there was one thing in particular that I enjoyed. A little in depth on the issues here. When we test issues, a lot of folks will tend to test them on a binary, right? It's just, do you really care about this or do you not care about that? Or maybe it's a sliding scale, right? How much do you care about it? Well, there's a problem. And the problem is that issues can be deceptive when it comes to passion. So just because you really, really care about an issue doesn't mean that issue is going to sway you necessarily, right? So there's a factor we introduced, which we call stickiness, okay? And if you think about it like this, right? You can care about something to an extreme degree, but if we start talking to you about it, is that actually going to stick? Is the message going to stick with you? Whether from preconceived notions or messaging from the left, or simply you might be very passionate about it, but you're not really paying attention too much to it. It's happened a lot more than you'd think. So we married up those two metrics to measure both how much you care about something and how sticky the message was. And a lot of times we would be able to do that with, say, okay, if you were high on the education scale, right? You really cared about education. Well, which issue within education is most important to you? Is it parents' rights? Is it school choice? Is it safety in schools? When you get down into it, and it was a very expensive endeavor, but when you get down into it, simply having one set of issues and saying, oh, well, education, we're going to talk about education, doesn't scratch the surface on what kind of messaging you can do and what, how you can talk to people. Education messaging is not just for parents who have kids in school. Obviously, that is a big thing, but then consider the difference between what motivates folks to vote, those who have kids in public school versus private school. Or what about elementary school versus high school? How about folks who have kids in college? Or how about people that are currently getting an advanced degree, or people going back to school for a GED, right? There's so many different groups of people that can get influenced by education. And truth be told, we have to talk to all of them, but it doesn't really do us any good to go to someone who's getting a PhD and has two kids that they really want to get PhDs as well, and talk about the benefits of trade school. That's not helpful messaging, because it's not what they care about. So we were able to model these sub issues, and it was one of the most significant investments of the campaign early on. And I'd say the results speak for themselves, but I think they absolutely do. And we worked with a company called WPA. They do some really great modeling in Virginia, and we were able to constantly refine and update that. One other big thing that we were able to do, and this is tough, and we put it into practice. We tried it in 21 and it went well. We're really trying it this year as well, and a bigger scale, is we linked up with all of the folks running for state house on the campaign. And we broke down a lot of barriers when it comes to data and analytics, as in to say, we all want to be talking to the same people. We all want to be reiterating the important messages. And we want to take a rising tide lifts all ships approach. Obviously, we would like people to, couch issues in their own way and talk about their own experiences if they're running for office. But we're talking to voters about what's important to them. We firmly believed at the time, and still do today, that we should be talking to people about what they care about, but all of our folks running for office should be talking about that. Now, in 2021, it was governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general running statewide, and then the entire state house, the House of Delegates here. So, that's 103 folks. This year, we have 1,298 local offices on the ballot, in addition to 140 between the House and the Senate seats that are up. So now we're working with, senators, delegates, school board, board of supervisors, sheriff, commonwealth attorney. Heck, we're helping out some soil and water conservation board folks. So we're delving into it, but that was getting everybody on the same page and using the same data sets is really critical. I think I hear oftentimes from people, they'll say, "Oh, do I have this data for free?" Right? They say, "We have this data for free," and that's great. Data can be very expensive. Modeling is very expensive. Consumer data is very expensive. Even purchasing historical data can be expensive. So we always like to look at the source. Where does that come from? So if you're working in Virginia and you're linked up within our ecosystem, the RNC's ecosystem, that whole subset here, the state party here has become a warehouse of data for all campaigns going back to, really all federal campaigns going back a while, but all state campaigns going back through 2021 as well. So that's warehouse of the party. So that someone has invested in that. But it can be really tricky to determine whether or not the data you're utilizing is good and is effective. And I think that one of the biggest challenges for us this year is getting that information into the hands of everybody running at the local level. But, we're seeing it already, a rising tide lifting all ships. The more folks we have on the school board, the more folks we have on board of supervisors, there's a policy agenda at play here, and there's a policy agenda on the ballot. And the truth is, no matter how much change we make at the state level on education, we do need common sense members of the school boards to make sure that they're not immediately attempting to undo the progress we make at the local level. Mm-hmm. So it's very important for the overall policy agenda. One last thing I'd like to talk about, and I know I'm delving into 2023 here. The truth is the Youngkin apparatus has been alive and well since about January of 2021. And we're seeing the culmination of a big piece of it with a new effort that we've launched a couple of weeks ago. Oh, goodness, I guess a month and a half ago now. Time flies. It's called Secure Your Vote, Virginia. So absentee ballots, early voting. This is one of the toughest nuts to crack, so to speak. And it has always been challenging for us to come up with good plans around what we're going to do for absentee ballot and early voting. Of course, people like to say, well, we get slaughtered in absentee ballots. We always lose absentee ballots, mail-in ballots in Virginia significantly. And that is true. And we would like that to not happen. So, we were starting from the same foundation. We knew we had to do something about it. In years past and all over the country, there's always been a big push to say, well, Republicans vote on election day. A lot of them do. Well, let's get all those Republicans to vote absentee. There's some logic to that in that in Virginia, we have a 45-day absentee period, so and early voting. So I would like to not spend as much money on get out the vote. And one of the ways to do that is to put people, push people to go absentee and early. But aside from the financial aspect, taking an election day voter and swapping them out to become an absentee voter is a net gain of 0 votes. It counts the same way. We don't pick up any votes. So we realized this year we had to do something really, really, really exciting if we were going to get some big changes and wins in the early voting and absentee category. So where do we start? We started with data. That's where we started. And we went out and did a modeling project, looked at who votes absentee, who is likely to vote absentee, who is likely to vote early, who is a likely candidate for the permanent absentee list. And then we didn't reinvent the wheel. We built an ecosystem around it. Mail, digital advertising and targeting, emails, field program at the doors, text messages, phone calls, all based on this, rooted in this data. And of course, 45 days of early voting, it's tough to stand up a grassroots apparatus in that amount of time, but thanks to the fact that we have good information that we're working with and good people in this state, we were able to do that. So we've got our teams out working right now. The really interesting piece of this is how we reach people and who do we talk to about what, right? So for example, I remember those voters I was referencing a few minutes ago, the 10% likely to turn out folks. Those people are great candidates for the permanent absentee list. If you're not likely to vote with everything going on these days in the country and in the state, it might honestly be a matter of convenience and forgetfulness. So if we can get you on the permanent absentee list, you will get an absentee ballot every single time, and it'll show up at your house, for X number of years. Folks who intend to vote on election day, but are busy, right? We can look at what's going on in people's lives. Do they have multiple kids? Do they have a high pressure job? Are they commuting? Do they have lots of extracurricular activities and interests or hobbies? And if so, despite the fact that they may want to vote on election day, we should probably deliver the information to them that says, hey, you can vote early. A lot of the methods of delivery are grassroots and digital. It's getting out, getting the message in front of people, kind of billboard style, come check out our website, see what you got going on there. And then person to person, getting getting in front of people, and it's not always physical, physically in front of people. It's digitally in front of people, encouraging people to activate a network, encouraging them to gather, talk to their friends and family in whatever medium they can. And we've made it very, very easy to incorporate the digital aspect into the grassroots element. So on our website that we launched, securelyvotevirginia.com, we have the ability, you can commit to voting early, which essentially turns us into your calendar alert. We will remind you that you said you would, and we will remind you of where and when you can do it. You can literally go on and sign up to receive an absentee ballot. You can do this online. You can apply for an absentee ballot. We send that directly to the registrar. We don't keep the important PI on there. That we shouldn't. And so that goes to the registrar. They can process your absentee ballot application. If there's an issue, they'll reach out to the voter directly. You can also sign up to join the permanent absentee list. I mean, there's so many different options there. But we're able to, I want to say track, but not just track. We're able to track and interact with people digitally in what I think is the most effective manner possible. So I'm expecting very good results from Secure Your Vote Virginia this year. It's going to be great. It's a joint effort between the state party and the governor's PAC, Spirit of Virginia. We're really, really, really looking forward to seeing how all of these things we're testing are going to play out. So far, so good. Everything's working across the board as far as we can tell. And one of the biggest things that we're going to do afterwards is look at where we spent our money best. Where was our best ROI? What can we improve, and what efficiencies can we have moving forward? So, I mean, that really, in a very long-winded way, that takes us from the beginning of the Youngkin campaign all the way to the latest initiative of Team Youngkin. So I guess with that, semi-chronological, I'll go ahead and stop and see if anybody has questions. Or Lisa, did you want to do questions now?
Yeah, I did. And I actually have one. So I think this is all very interesting, and you and Klaus and I talked about it when we were there, and how you did that with the sheriffs. I think that is just a great story. But how does that work for a smaller campaign? I mean, that's great for a governor's campaign. How does a smaller campaign manage all that? Can you address that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the important thing for us to remember, and obviously on a smaller campaign, we're not talking about TV ads. Right. If it's a video, it's going to be a Facebook Live. That's what it's going to be. No, but when we talk about smaller campaigns, I always like to remember that we are talking about mediums that are not going to have as much offset and variability of costs. So what I mean by that, right? If you're getting text messages at 6 cents a piece, unless you're getting up to 15, 20 million text messages, which none of us are, the price isn't going down. So when we always have a tendency to think about polling when we're talking about data instead of thinking about modeling. No matter how small, you looked at just a precinct, right? There is still the ability to look at individual voters and break out what's important to them. So no matter how small the geography, the political geography that you're running in, you can always use modeling and then use issue-based targeting. Even if we're talking about, let's say you're running for school board and the sheriff endorses you. Well, that's great. Let's get a side-by-side photo endorsed by Sheriff Smith, and then let's text that to everyone who has a bent towards law enforcement. I think it's obviously there's another tough aspect that elephant in the room on cost, because the modeling project has to be done. Frankly, and what I think a lot of campaigns have not been aware of in the past is there's almost always someone doing a modeling project somewhere. The RNC does them all over the country. We've done so many here in Virginia with the governor's campaign and the governor's team. I mean, there's always data. It's the what's that show? There's always money in the banana stand, right? There's always data that's available. Even if you don't have the most in-depth modeling project, we might be careful. 2022 there was modeling projects all over the country, especially with competitive congressional districts. We're going to be careful. We don't want to use the same turnout, but we can look at what was important to people back then. And if you can't afford a modeling project this year, or there's no one doing one at a statewide level, it's going to be a more likely than not that people are still voting based on the same issues. So there's always information that's available, even if it's not the highest quality.
Thank you. So I am going to open it up to everybody else. I've got you all on mute. So I think if you have a question, you can unmute yourself and just ask Ken or raise your hand and we'll open it up. After Ken answers a few questions, we are going to talk a little bit about Buzz 360. So we'll save maybe 5 to 10 minutes at the end. So if you have questions, please feel free to raise your hand.
Ken, this is Randy Sutter. The question to you, in the Youngkin campaign, did you rely just on data center and RNC data, or did you make a concerted effort to go and gather more data than just what's available in the RNC database?
Great question. So the answer is both yes and no, depending on which information we're talking about. So from a modeling standpoint, how do voters feel about the issues in Virginia in 2021? We made a concerted effort to collect that information ourselves. And you know, it was a good partnership. I think the RNC would recommend that, right? If you can collect state-specific information on specific races and issues at hand, definitely do it. You know, there's no such thing as over collecting data. I'm sure someone's going to pop up and have an example of that, but I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as over collection on data. However, when we talk about what exists in the RNC sphere, the RNC, they do have modeling projects and they will do modeling projects. I think I actually did one in 2021. But the data that we rely on from the RNC is addresses, phone numbers, you know, that kind of information. And that we did. Yes, in GOP data center, the RNC has some sort of, you know, back-end system tools that are easier to interact with, I think. And so not literally directly out of data center, but it's all backed by data trust. So that's where voter files, phone numbers, consumer data, that's where all that's housed. And everything we use that wasn't specifically a Virginia-based modeling project we did was backed by data trust.
Okay, good question. Thank you, Randy. Go ahead.
Well, I'll go ahead and ask the follow-up question then. In your micro-targeting, did you rely then upon the state data that you in your campaign specifically gathered yourself, or were you able to micro-target with the data center data?
Ooh, okay. The duct tape, the workaround. Yeah. So obviously we did rely a lot on the modeling projects that we used. We did marry that information up with consumer data heavily. So that is available, right? That's data trust backed. So there was always a good partnership. And I think, correct me if I'm going off on a tangent here, the question that you're getting at is, can it be done without that modeling project? Can it be done just using what's in the RNC system? So yes, sort of. If you're willing to do the analytics, there's a difference between data modeling and lookalike universes. Lookalikes are, you know, let's say that, you know, you and I are the same we're the same job, the same income, the same age, from the same town. Let's say we get a lot of similarities between us, right? And if you vote one way and I know that, the lookalike universe would say that I'm likely to vote that way too. Those kinds of things you can build out from the information that is available. Where modeling differs, or where it goes beyond, is, you know, you have these PhDs in data science who stare at, you know, 40 computer screens and process an unbelievable amount of information and know however many digits out from pi that they possibly could. And those people are starting with lookalikes and then going way further in depth. So it's always better information. But there is a way, if you have someone with data experience, there is a way that you can patchwork something together for good targeting from what exists in data trust. It's just a lot of raw information that you're looking at when it's data trust backed, and so you need somebody to put it all together. But it can be done. It has been done actually in a lot of states. It's not as good as modeling, but it's not bad.
Anyone else have more questions?
Let me ask one follow-on question. If not, if there's nobody else. Is data trust a separate database than data center and the RNC data?
So yeah, Data Trust is a company that you could consider like a warehouse, right? They take in data and they take in and push out data. That's all they do. They're just a massive warehousing company. So GOP Data Center is a tool that I believe was built by FLS for the RNC to act as a CRM to house data for individual states or for the whole country. So data trust is purely on the back end. They don't have a tool that you could access. You wouldn't see it. They're maintaining, cleaning, purchasing, refining all of the data that goes into GOP Data Center.
Thank you.
This is Jim McLaughlin. Is there a single most effective communication tool, or are there tools that are most appropriate by age group?
Great question. So you would be really surprised to see the results of some recent studies on age-based communications. For example, voters over the age of 55, text message, very effective. Voters under the age of 35, a piece of mail is shockingly effective. The single unifying factor right now is driving digital. And I say that because it's not necessarily banner ads on a website, but it's if you can drive someone to interact with you digitally. You'll notice a common theme, right? Mail comes out and it says, go to our website. A text comes out and it says, click this link, right? What we're all trying to do is drive them towards digital interaction because that is your highest ROI. I can get you the best information as effectively and efficiently as possible if I can get you to interact with me digitally. Because I can sit behind my computer screen, I can send you emails, I can serve up ads, I can send you text messages. Anything I can do to get you to interact with me digitally is going to be the most effective. But it is funny, it is the exact opposite of what you'd think in terms of age-based communication methods. And there's a simple reason for that. It's that people under the age of 35 aren't getting mail, and they just don't. And people over the age of 55 are on average getting fewer text messages, which is not actually as true as the mail. The mail thing is much more consistent. Over the age of 55 is it's a little hit or miss, but it's a fun trend to talk about.
And if you wouldn't mind, send me a link to that data or that study, I would love to look at it.
Yeah, we'll do.
As a follow-up, is there a specific percentage of our population for whom we should have email addresses? For example, if we're a political organization or a candidate, should we try to have emails for all the calculated Republicans, 50% of the calculated Republicans?
Yeah. So here's the general rule with email. I'm trying to pick my words carefully here. Right now at the state party, we have the largest email list we've ever had. And that's really great. It's very exciting. And it's fun that I can talk about that. But I don't care about that. I don't care about the size. There's one thing I care about with the state party's email list. And that is in the year 2023, every single person on my email list has opened at least one of my emails. That's what I care about. So email communication is much like anything else, right? I am not a big voice message person, right? If someone leaves me a voice message, I may not even notice. So if you leave me a voice message, that's not an effective way to communicate. Some people don't communicate effectively over email. Oftentimes candidates and parties will focus very heavily on volume. They'll focus on numbers or like how many they think they should have. And I think everyone in the digital sphere is victim to this to a certain extent, right? Because they want percentage growth. But the truth is that you're better off with a list of 500 people that's actively giving you money and forwarding your things to their friends and putting the things you send them on social media, or heck, even printing it out and hanging it on the fridge. you're better off with 500 versus 5,000 people that aren't opening your emails. So I don't think there's a particular percentage or number. I think it's all about interaction. And if you're below 30%, well, let's see, a big email list. If you're below 25% for an open rate on your average email, then I think your list has grown faster than your content can keep up with. That's my estimate. Lisa, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, very good. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question. I was wondering if with this contact list that we have, this email contact list that we have, how would we, I mean, wouldn't we have to spread a broad net first to be able to gather the data to see who is our opener or active or interactive people so we can narrow down that list?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Digital marketing over email is a tricky concept. You do have to do that. You have to start by spreading well. First, you got to start by getting rid of any bad emails. We always run it through a company like Neverbounce, whatever. They charge you minimal per email to just see if it's good. Then you take the good ones. Then you have to warm up an email list. If you're testing it, you have to warm it up, which means you can't just send everyone 5 emails, over 3 days. You got to go in smaller segments. And but then as people are not opening emails, they should be removed from the list, removed from your list pretty decently regularly, or at least shelved, warehoused. One thing I like to look at particularly is we'll always start by sending a fundraising email, because that small segment of people that's going to interact with that, those are my hardcore people. And I'm going to put them on a special list. And then, occasionally we'll drag out old emails. Like if I know you've at some point opened something, we can put you on a shelf and we'll drag you out. We'll have our 40th annual conference here in Virginia, Republican Party of Virginia, our 40th annual retreat weekend. It's called the Advance. For the 40th annual, I'm going to drag out every email address I got. Now I'm going to send them at least one email. But yes, you do have to cast a bit of a wider net in the beginning to determine what's good on your list.
This is Jim McLaughlin again. You mentioned a engaging subject line. What are the topics that are going to persuade people to open an email or to actually follow through on a text message?
Yeah. So texting is easier because, well, Lisa, what's the statistic? Is it 92% of people open it within 8 minutes or something?
And texting, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So texting, especially if you know the person or familiar with them. Email is really interesting because now we're getting into, if you're doing marketing, like digital marketing over email, not sending a friend an email. If you're sending a friend an email, if they already have your email address, short and factual. It's nice and easy. There's no reason to go in the other direction. But when we're sending emails, to be honest, it's clickbaity, right? The entire goal is to get them to open that email. And, the subject line should be somewhat related to the email content. But
3 words.
Yeah, there you go, 3 words. Yeah, and when we're sending out emails about Secure Your Vote Virginia, that's the program name. The subject line is "Your vote secure?" ? And then of course we explain in the email that this is what we're doing. But I really am a huge fan of A/B testing. That's one thing that's available with most ESPs, most platforms that you're sending emails through. You can typically A/B test when you're doing mass emails. And that's very cool because you can have 2 subject lines, and we'll always set it up to say we're going to send 5% of the list this subject line A, 5% of the list subject line B, and then after 2 hours, whichever one has more opens, that's the one that we're going to send the other 90%. And it's all automated. I mean, you just plug in 2 subject lines, but yeah, those are some. There's some definitely great techniques there, but the 3 words got to be a little clickbaity.
Very good. One more question.
What about social media, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, etc., Twitter? How
Yeah.
effective are they?
So I think you'll find that a lot of people who work in data are not big fans of social media. So everything I say is about to come with a massive grain of salt here, but I'll try to keep it as objective as possible. So it depends which platform you're talking about. TikTok, I won't even delve into because I like my data out of the hands of. Well, anyways, we're recording this call, so I'll just say I'm not on TikTok. But Twitter, my opinion of Twitter is that anybody on Twitter already knows how they're voting or is a journalist. So Twitter is good for getting sound bites out that might be picked up by the media. We do recommend people engage with Twitter because it's short and easy, and sometimes a journalist can pick something up. But if you've noticed that every time a politician gets in trouble for something, it's either a hot mic or a tweet. Then that and do you notice that every time they delete it very quickly, it's still there, no matter how quickly they delete it. So I think Twitter can be very reactionary, and I don't think you reach a large audience there. Now, Facebook is a different story. Facebook is still housing a lot of voters. Their advertising can actually be pretty effective. Facebook's algorithms do make it so that you're seeing content and getting served content that is related to the content you're already interacting with. And we do a ton of advertising on Facebook. It is an incredibly effective tool for now. Instagram does not have as much benefit for us. Instagram is good for higher end, smaller volume retail. That's the marketing segment that thrives on Instagram. We don't really have much of a need for that. In general, with social media, the most important thing to remember is unless you're paying for it, you are only reaching people that have already agreed that they want to be reached by you. So a lot of times people will post something on Facebook and go, oh, so many people are going to see this. Yes, all of the people that already found you and signed up to see it. And so unless you're spending money, social media is not the place where you're going to pick up new voters.
Well, good. Ken, I so appreciate your time today, and it was really great seeing you again, even if it's digitally. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes and talk a little bit about Buzz 360, but I know you've got an election coming up, so drop off if you want. You and I have gone over this many times before. So thank you very much. I appreciate it, and take care, and let's win Virginia.
Thanks, Lisa, and thanks everybody for joining today. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, but yeah, I'll talk to y'all soon.
Take care. So I'm just going to quick, most of the people that are still on here are Buzz 360 customers, but I did want to just take a minute to address some of the things that Ken's talking about. As you all probably know, these are the features that we have in our all-in-one platform. But one of the things that I wanted to talk a little bit about, now that we're an RNC approved vendor, we have a lot more data that can be used for targeting. And you see my little graph here, and in correlation with the screen here, what is in Buzz 360. So, when Ken is talking about targeting, obviously he's talking a much more kind of micro targeting. But here are some big brackets. If you're looking at people that always vote Republican and have a high frequency, maybe you need to contact them about being a volunteer or a donor, perhaps. And you can see, down the low frequency voter, you're probably not going to spend too much time trying to reach them if they're a swing voter. And Ken talked a little bit about that. Obviously, Democrats, leave them alone. For sure, don't tell them to get out and vote. But in the Buzz 360 system, you will see now, if you are connected, or if you haven't used Buzz 360, if you're connected to the RNC now in our system, you can see, there's the general frequency. How many times is it a 4 out of 4 voter? That would put them up here in the high frequency. If they're a strong Republican, that would put them here. They always vote Republican. And down here is now a new field that's just come out in 2023, voter history. So you can see this person, Lisa Schneegans, that is obviously me. You can see that I'm a primary voter and a general election voter. So all that information is available to you if you're connected to the RNC data center through our product. But one of the things that Ken was talking about, data modeling, and the RNC has done some data modeling that is now in the system for you, and these can be special interest targets. This is one, this person is, they don't like Biden, and their two hot topics would be border security and the economy. There's a whole bunch of issue-based modeling done for us that if you wanted to, you could use, set up an audience for just those people. And, when you listening to Ken is really informative, because really what he's talking about is setting together goals, right? Putting together a digital plan and really an outline of where, when, and how you're going to reach people, why you're going to reach them, and then do that targeting like he was talking about. And we're talking about, we really need to start setting goals. In my opinion, anyway, we should all be setting goals, because if you don't measure it, you're not going to reach it. But for an example that we're talking about here, maybe how many dollars are you going to fundraise digitally using digital methods? Or many of you, many of our customers send out an email, or a newsletter email. How many new subscribers are you getting? Are you getting new subscribers? But those are things that we should be measuring. How many neighborhood events do you have per cycle? How many text messages are you having? And are you getting new opt-ins for your text messages? Is your message appropriate? And are they passing it on to their friends? And that brings us to the next one, is new relationships formed and how many events do you have. So each of you should probably be thinking about the different kind of plans you're going to have for 2023 or 2024 coming up. And that's where we're going to have those goals. Now, we talked about with Ken how to be in touch with people. And for those of you that use our product, know that you can have broadcast emails. Those are good for a lot of different things. Broadcast and P2P text messaging, friends and family messages, and they can be a text message, a direct message. And that's the single most effective way to get people engaged and activate your grassroots, is friends asking them to join around. And after that, review that plan. Was it successful? Did you meet your goal? Or do you need to start some different things? Look at your successes and your failures. And because I want to be respectful of your time, we're going to go fast through that. But I did want to bring up, here's my name and email and phone number. If anybody doesn't have that already or would like to reach me, that would be great. But I do want to put a plug in for our next event coming up on September 13th, which is Ned Ryan from American Majority. And he is doing really good work on ballot chase. American Majority calls it ballot out, ballot in. So that's their program, but it really is ballot chase. So that's going to be on September 13th. If you haven't gotten an invite already, let me know, send me an email and tell me you want to be on that list so you can participate in that, because Ned is just a dynamic individual. Many of you have seen him on Fox News. I know he's been here in Minnesota, so he's been traveling around, but I'm really looking forward and excited to have Ned come on the 13th of September on Zoom. So I'll open it up to any questions that you might have from me. But otherwise, I will, I think we're up on our time. Any questions?
Lisa, a quick one on the, there are some scores out there now,
Yes.
the Republican score, the Democrat score, et cetera. Is there an explanation of those values?
There is. I can send it to you, Jim, and I can send it out to anybody that is looking for it.
Thank you.
Lisa, the question on one of your first charts that had tier 1, tier 2.
Right.
When you went through it quickly, I don't think I didn't see where you explained how you came up with tier 1 and tier 2.
So the tier one audience are those people that always vote Republican, but they're infrequent voters. So that would be the tier one that you'd want to go after because they always are voting Republican.
So is that a combination of one
Correct.
strong Republican and 4 general frequency?
That would be a combination. That would be maybe a 2 or a 3 general frequency, probably a 3, but always Republican, that they are a Republican voter. The low frequency, I would say, Randy, is a 2. If this were a general election or a primary, and it would be a 2 out of 4, that would be a tier 2, in my opinion. You know, focus on the ones that we can do the biggest impact to first.
Okay, so there's nothing in your database where you can filter strictly on a number that will say all these are tier 1s. It's sort of a combination of
No.
a couple of different factors in your database.
It would be a combination of different factors. So you would say, you know, if I were going to build an audience here, I would say, you know, a calculated party of a hard Republican and a general frequency of a 2 would be, you know, down in here. General frequency of 3 would be up here. Those are the ones that we're going to focus on. You know, this it kind of is ranking them on where we should focus the most.
Thank you.
Any other questions? I hope this was valuable today. It's a new thing that we're trying to bring speakers from that we come in contact with. Like I said, the next one is Ned. We're pushing for another one closer in the October timeframe with Eric Wilson from, he is a digital guru and about AI and politics. So we're lining things up. Hope that you found today's valuable. I know you'll be interested in listening to Ned in a couple of weeks. So if anybody has any questions, please reach out to me. And thank you for coming today. And I hope you found it useful.
Thank you, Lisa.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Thank you.